G'day, it's Jerry here. Today I want to share with you some information about soldering irons. Recently my YIHUA 853D soldering station stopped working properly. It would turn on, but it was displaying weird numbers on the digital displays for both the soldering iron and the heat gun, and the soldering iron refused to heat up at all. So obviously I thought it's the soldering iron that's at fault. Now it turns out that wasn't actually the root cause. When I opened up the unit, I found some loose wires inside and I replugged them and everything started working properly again. But in the meantime, I learnt a whole bunch of stuff about soldering irons, including how you can test them using a multimeter to see whether or not they're faulty. I also discovered that buying a replacement soldering iron may not be as simple as you think. There are some subtle differences with soldering irons which could really trip you up, and I'm glad that I figured it out before I have to order one when the soldering iron finally does break. So in this video I want to show you a few things, including how to test whether or not your soldering iron is actually faulty, and explain to you what's going on between these two soldering irons. Because if you order a replacement soldering iron from, say, AliExpress, you may not get exactly what you're asking for, and it can cause all sorts of problems with your soldering station. So let's get into that right now. So this blue one here is the one that came off the YIHUA 853D soldering station. Now this one over here actually came with a completely different soldering station that I have, and this is a 536 something. Now they look pretty much the same, although you can see this one has some vents here. You can see that. On this one they look pretty much the same, and they definitely have the same connector, which is 5-pin DIN. Now, we'll start off by showing you how you can do a basic test to see whether or not your soldering iron is definitely dead. And then I'll get on to, well, if it's not dead, it could also not be compatible with your soldering station. So, at least with these 5-pin DIN ones, and I'm not saying that there aren't ones that are wired differently, but these seem to be pretty popular. So, there's 5 pins and they're numbered 1 to 5. So you can use a multimeter to test the resistance between the pins. So pins 1 and pins 2 is the heating element. Okay? And on this one it's giving me 16.8 ohms. So if that was open, then your heating element is probably done, and you can buy heating elements quite readily. Very easy to open up these soldering irons and replace that. So pin number 3 is actually just an earth connected to the metal part of the soldering iron. Okay, so 0.6 of an ohm. That's there to earth the tip so you don't get static electricity coming off and destroying your circuit as you're soldering it. So then we get to pins 4 and 5, and this is actually the temperature sensor. Now there's a positive and a negative, and in my case the positive is the 5th pin and the 4th pin. And you can see that there is 1.1, 1.2 ohms. It goes down. So it's stable there at about 1 ohms. Okay, and so that is the temperature sensor, thermistor. And a thermistor is like a resistor that increases in resistance the hotter it gets. And that's how the soldering station can work out what the temperature currently is of the soldering iron and stop heating when it reaches the temperature, and keep applying power when it drops below the temperature that you want. So what I can do is I can quickly show you this changing its value if I heat it with the hot air gun. Might take a while. Probably put a bigger tip on it, but you can see that it's going up. And it will keep going up until it reaches what the soldering station has been calibrated to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it on and heat it up to something reasonably large. Let me just plug this in. So I've got it plugged into the soldering station, and I'm heating it up to, it's set to 360 degrees. So we've gone from basically 1 ohm. So at room temperature, it's basically 1 ohm. Let's see what it is when it reaches 360 degrees. Okay, so we're at 300, it was actually 362. So I'll turn that off. And we will check to see what the resistance is now. So it's 55, 54. It's going to go down. Okay, so 360, it gets to 54 ohms. Okay, so that's all great. It's working exactly as it should. Now here's the problem that I faced, and it really, really confused me, because I thought, okay, since I have this other not so sophisticated soldering station here, I can plug that soldering iron into this and actually check to see if it works. This is sort of before I became comfortable with using the multimeter. Right, so this should work. And in actual fact it does, but it actually displays a really weird symptom, which I didn't understand until I really started measuring them with the multimeter. What would happen is that I would set this to say 300 degrees, and it would turn on and it would never turn off. It wouldn't stop heating. It kept heating and heating and heating. And I thought that was really weird. And I actually thought the soldering iron was faulty. But let me show you the readings of this soldering iron. So pins 1 and 2. So this is the heating element, just the resistance. So 3.6, 3.5, whatever. Okay. And we've also got the same earth connection. Okay, but here's where it gets interesting. At room temperature, this is 53 ohms. Okay, so when I plugged this into the soldering station, the 853D, it immediately said that the soldering iron was at something like 650 degrees. And refused to heat it, obviously. So that's really interesting. If you order a replacement soldering iron for your soldering station, you could run into this problem. And of course the symptom is that the soldering station believes that it's already at or above the temperature because the resistance is very high. Or alternatively, you get one where the resistance is very low and the soldering station expects it to start off at, say, 50 ohms or something like that, and it never turns off. It keeps heating it forever. Either way, that's a big problem. So what I suggest, and what I have done, is measure the resistance of your soldering iron before it breaks. That way you'll know exactly what you need to get, and hopefully you can find somebody that will give you the figures of the starting resistance, the room temperature resistance, before you purchase it. All right, well that's it for this video. I hope you found that interesting, informative. Look, if you like what I'm doing, please think about giving me a thumbs up, subscribing to my channel, leaving a comment, all of that good stuff, and I'll catch you on the next one. Ciao.